Hi, everyone. It's Ryan Fowler with the Inner Game Group live every Saturday at this time. I'm here with my good friend, Tim Costello. We're going to have a very foundational, I just brain farted. We're going to have a very foundational presentation today because we're talking about the building blocks of our emotions, what makes up our emotions, and how can we use that knowledge to help master our emotions. But before we get into that, Tim, welcome to the show. Introduce yourself.
Thank you, Ryan. I am Tim from TimCostelloHypnosis.com. One thing I like about today's topic, and sometimes we talk sort of higher level, is this brings it right down to the root of what your emotions are and why you can do something about them. This is really key because sometimes we think that we are sort of born into an emotional state, and that's simply not true. What is true is that we develop our emotions, which is a reaction to our subconscious programming in our youth. And that's what I like about this, is it is rock bottom, root cause kind of stuff.
All right, very good. And Jordan Kurtz, who is usually with us, he's actually at a training boot camp right now. He couldn't make it. I was supposed to go to it too, but I still have tail end of a sickness. So I am here with Tim. So nice. Most of what we're looking at today is us commenting on an Andrew Huberman podcast. But we kind of want to frame it first with something even more foundational than what he goes into, just to really kind of fill it out. And of course, the reason we do a show is we have quite a bit to add on to what they are saying. So let's first just go up. What are the basic building blocks of our emotions? And we're going to play this and we're going to dive in and find out.
The Cannon-Bard theory suggests that emotions and the physiological reactions are two separate things that occur at the same time, and one does not cause the other.
But they're related, by the way, very, very connected to each other.
Yeah. Today, psychologists generally define emotions as a psychological state involving three distinct components working together: a subjective experience, a physiological response, and a behavioral response. These components work together to create what we experience as emotions. Subjective experience refers to how you as an individual perceive an event, regardless of how it is objectively occurring or how other people perceive it. You might feel excited to start a new job, while your friend might feel terrified about starting the exact same job. In this case, there are differences in how you and your friend perceive the same event. The physiological part of emotion is how your body actually responds to an experience. Is your heart palpitating with fear from starting your new job, or is it beating in excitement? The same physiological response, fast heartbeats, occurs with multiple emotions and will interact with your subjective experience to shape which emotion you feel at a specific time. Finally, the behavioral response is how you actually express emotion. How are you going to express your excitement on your first day at your new job? Are you going to smile because you feel happy, or are you going to laugh with joy instead? All three of these components, subjective experience, physiological response, and behavioral response, work together to create your emotions.
Okay, I want to break this down a little, Tim. Do you have anything to say first?
You know, I know probably where you're going to go, and this is a good place. So I won't say too much about it. Mm-hmm. But I love the subjective experience part about this more than the other two, because we are born into a situation of which we have no control. And over time, your subconscious will attempt to protect you and take control. So I'll leave it right there, and then you can go on, and then I'll comment again.
Yeah, so the way, and welcome to the show, Crafting and Crime Daily, by the way.
That's my friend, Rebecca.
Very good. Very nice. So here's the thing. Our behavioral response and physiological response are triggered by the subjective experience. And we know that as practitioners who work with people on reprogramming this over and over and over and over and over. So, for example, there are many times people come to me with certain anxieties, and the subjective experience is their brain interpreting when something happens, what does it mean? So one person, like they said, may say, oh man, I'm going to this job interview. I'm going to nail this interview. This is going to be great. And they're confident. The other one's fearful. Exact same situation, two different belief systems that lead to two different subjective experiences. By the way, who do you think has a higher chance of getting hired just based on the emotional states? The excited or the fearful? What do you think?
Well, I would say the more excited one.
Yeah. And
they'll shut down less.
Yeah, they've done psychological studies where out of Stanford, I forgot the lady's name, but she did this study where you put your arms in a V formation for 2 minutes, and even blind people who've never seen that before, if they have a moment of victory, they'll do this. It's a universal expression around the world, and so what we do with our body can affect our mood, and our mood affects what we do with our body. It's all interconnected. So she had people do it for 2 minutes, and they actually felt more confident, and then their chance of getting the job increased by 40%. That's what the study.
I believe it. Yep.
So, it's all connected. But I have people who come to me, and I know you've had it many, many times yourself, Tim, where they say, in this situation, I'm anxious. In this situation, I'm fearful. In this situation, I'm procrastinating. I'm avoiding it. And that's getting in the way of me doing work and getting what I want, or going after what I want, or whatever. And we go inside and we change their brain's belief system, and now they have a different subjective experience, and that will actually drive the physiological and behavioral response. They will now feel differently and behave differently. And yeah, maybe the heart rate's fast, but now it's excitement, or maybe they stay calm. So it really could be I would say the subjective experience based on our subconscious beliefs and the emotions tied to them really drives the other two. But what do you think, Tim?
First of all, hello, Skinny Too Swole. Anyway, they just popped in. You didn't miss them. I just saw them real quick. So the thing I like about the subjective experience part of this circle is that it is 100% pattern matching in our subconscious.
Yeah.
So as we grow up in that 0 to 8 years old, mostly, and some are saying 0 to 3 is a lot of that percentage, you will develop feelings, or you will develop narratives and beliefs. Ryan's talking about those core beliefs. You'll develop those core beliefs. And that core belief could be, I'm loved and I'm freaking awesome and I can do whatever I want. Or it could be, I don't know who loves me. I'm not sure. And that makes me a bit anxious. I don't know if I can do anything. And quite frankly, no one's taught me anything. Nobody really loves me. So I really don't feel that good about myself. Either one of those are just simply software running in your brain. So as you grow up into an adult, you are now going to experience that subjective experience, right? A job interview, a new job, whatever. The person who's rigged well and has a good subconscious underpinning will go, hey, I'm a little anxious and nervous because it's also kind of new, but I'll get over that pretty quick once we get in the building and, get a little training going and that kind of stuff. Where the other person who doesn't know how good they are and they feel that they're not good enough, or they feel that they don't belong, guess what? That pattern will match from their youth, and then they will simply look at this situation as, oh my goodness, I am scared to death because they're going to discover I'm no good. That kind of stuff, or whatever the routine is. So when Ryan mentions we go into the subconscious and reprogram that, essentially we're erasing the old software, installing new software, and many people can't even figure out why they feel so great. They're just what changed? Yeah, what changed?
So the subjective response that they were talking about, that is a subconscious program, and it's different for different people based on what happened when they were growing up and how they interpreted it. Now, I will say also, we have an element of instinct, which is hardwired. You know, most guys are hardwired to be attracted to women. Most women are hardwired to be attracted to guys. That's not something that, you know, we just decided when we were kids based on what happened to us. You know, if you see a big growling bear coming at you, pretty much everyone's going to be scared. So we do have some instinct interplaying with our subconscious as well. It's important to point that out. But we're going to watch the Andrew Huberman clip now, and he's going to get really foundational, but he's going to start talking about predictions. And when he talks about predictions, that is also the subjective experience. It is based on my beliefs, on my experiences of what happened in similar situations in the past. I believe it means this, and I believe this will happen now in this situation now. And then we have certain emotions come up that our brain believes will lead us to acting the best way to handle what it feels is happening or going to happen. So let's go ahead and get to Andrew Huberman here. Boom, baby. All right, and here we go. Now, this can be a lot longer clip. It actually goes into attachment styles too, which Tim, you were kind of alluding to earlier, and it actually gets pretty fascinating. Who knows? Who knew attachments? Some people say attachment styles aren't real, but they are. We're going to go and do some of the studies here. You had your session back in October. Life is good. Think being gay is a learned behavior. That I think it's some of it, possibly all. I'm not sure. All right, so let's keep going with this.
Emotions. Emotions are a fascinating and vital aspect of our life experience. It's fair to say that emotions make up most of what we think of as our experience of life. Even the things we do, our behaviors, and the places we go, and the people we end up encountering in our life, all of that really funnels into our emotional perception of what those things mean, whether or not they made us happy or sad or depressed or lonely or were awe-inspiring. Now, one thing that is absolutely true is that everyone's perception of emotion is slightly different, meaning your idea of happy is very likely different than my idea of what a state of happiness is. And we know this also for color vision, for instance. Even though the cells in your eye and my eye that perceive the color red are identical right down to the genes that they express, we can be certain, based on experimental evidence, what are called psychophysical studies, that your idea of the most intense red is going to be very different than my idea of the most intense red if we were given a selection of 10 different reds and asked which one is most intense, which one looks most red. And that seems crazy. You would think that something as simple as color would be universal, and yet it's not. And so we need to agree at the outset that emotions are complicated, and yet they are tractable. They can be understood. And today we're going to
Okay, so I want to make a comment here. And I'm wondering what your thoughts are too. Beware of any program that has a one-size-fits-all solution, because we're not all the same size. Any program. So what I say, people come to me, our subconscious mind, incredibly complicated, just like extremely complicated. Tim and I, we work on the parts that there are portions, like anyone who has toxic shame, it's not helping you in today's world. Maybe in ancient times, to an extent, it preserved the cohesion of the tribe by keeping people who felt not good enough, like kept their heads down. So the those at the top, and again, not some tribes are egalitarian, by the way, but it may have had a purpose back then and hierarchies back then, but it doesn't now at all. So we fix that. But Tim and I, one thing I say is you go after what you want. You decide where you want to go in life, what you want to do, because honestly, something that's a fantastic solution for someone, one person may be a horrible solution for others, because we all have different subjective experiences, our and some of our differing subconscious programs are just preferences. And why would you even want to change those? I mean, I like certain things. Why would I, I love chocolate. Why would I want to reprogram my subconscious to prefer vanilla more? It's a waste of time. So, when because I see these gurus all the time, Tim, where, oh, if you're doing this, then it's bad. If you're doing this, then it's right. And they're just so rigid in their mindsets. And I would beware of any life coach who has kind of a rigid prescription for everyone for this reason, because we are all different and we all have to find our own path to some extent. What do you think, Tim? I can't hear you, Tim.
Yeah, I had a cough, so I turned my mic off.
Yeah.
I think it's 100% accurate, Ryan, and here's why. You did not grow up in the same environment I did, and I don't mean psychologically. I'm talking about physically.
Everything.
Right.
Yeah.
I grew up in Phoenix, Arizona, and Wheeling, West Virginia for most of my growing up years, 0 to 18. The environments are different. The chemicals around are different. I mean, there's so much. The people are different. The cultures are different. I mean, there's so many things you learn, even the way you talk. Why does a Southerner talk the way they do? They grow up in a different environment, right? The baby doesn't come out with a language. It learns the language from those around it. So just as complex as all that is, so is the complexity of the psychological environment or emotional environment that we grow up around. We could be affected maybe more by our aunts and uncles than our parents, because our parents are never there. Maybe grandparents. I mean, brothers and sisters might end up raising us. If we're number 9 in a tribe and, your older sister's 18 and she raises you for the mom. So, and she doesn't have any experience doing that. So when we deal with people, we have to understand what's going on in their subconscious. That's all that matters. What's happening in your subconscious? I don't care about 100 videos out there that tell you what could be going on, but let's talk about you. And that's why we've got 35 words for each individual toxic shame in the descriptive word list.
Partial list. Yeah, we have a worksheet called the Diet of the 5 Descriptive Word List. There's 5 types of trauma, but we have a bunch of different words because one person may feel not good enough, like they're falling short. Another feels that they're creepy. And those are 2 different, they're in the same category, but 2 different things. One may feel one may feel the other. And by the way, our self-hypnosis program, the basic program, is free. Right down there, join our free community, school.com/RyanFowlerSOS-723. It's a free self-hypnosis program. Yes, we have paid stuff too, but the free stuff can actually help you. It's not just information. There's actually self-hypnosis training and worksheets and a audio on that. So find out for yourself what we are talking about. But we are really big on our tools show you how to go inward and fix what's not serving you according to what you determine, rewire your subconscious, get it to where you want to get it.
Right. So super important to realize that Ryan and I are both talking about the complexity. Even Dr. Huberman and even the previous fellow, the professor guy, they talk very generally because you can't talk so specifically about one particular thing because it may not apply to the whole crowd, where the generality of it does work, right? Does apply to everyone, or for most of us, I should say. So yeah, there is no one pill, right? There's no one size fits all. I mean, there is a t-shirt called that one size fits many now because it's not all, right?
Yeah.
So it's important to realize it's very complex and it requires individual diving to understand what's going on.
Yeah. When we do sessions, it's always tailored to that individual. We spend time figuring out what is in that individual in order to help them.
Yes.
So, and another example I'd like to point out is I have seen people, for example, Dr. Jordan Peterson, Michaela Peterson, they have to do the carnivore diet. Their bodies just really poorly react to almost all vegetables, I believe.
Yes.
So they have to do the carnivore diet, and it works wonderfully for them. They had all this inflammation and rashes and all these issues and fatigue and all this stuff. They went on carnivore, disappeared. But I've seen there's a documentary. It was on Netflix. It's called Fat, Sick, and Nearly Dead. And that was about a gentleman who was 90 pounds overweight. And he met another guy who's like 150 pounds overweight. And they did, for 6 months, vegetable smoothies. That's all they had.
Yep.
And he went off all of his prescription medications. He lost his 90 pounds. The other guy lost like 100. And they were doing amazing on that. But that would probably kill Jordan and Michaela Peterson. Probably kill them, or just cause massive health problems, because they've tried diets along those lines and got very sick on them. So understand your emotional makeup, your psychological makeup is unique to you. Some people, for example, so I like to be social, but I like a lot of solitude. And I'm kind of half and half, but
me too.
Other people, like President Trump, there is this psychological analysis. He constantly loves to be with people.
Yep.
He's very, 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 and that's who he is. And that's fine. Well, some solutions that would be great for him for things he struggled with wouldn't work for me at all.
Right.
And I wouldn't want his life, because I'd be like, it's too much people. And there's nothing wrong with that at all whatsoever. Right. So we got to find out what's right for you and your own emotional makeup. So what's
key to all that, Ryan, is once most of the trauma is cleared away and you have a reprogrammed subconscious that benefits you, you now can find who you really are.
Yeah.
Till then, it's all a play. I mean, take the narcissist, for example. The narcissist doesn't hate anybody because they hate themselves so deeply they can't even realize that.
Well,
and a lot of people think, a lot of people think they hate me. They don't hate you. They don't like themselves, right? They're so damaged that every single thing they're doing is to put on a play that they think the world wants to see, that will make people think highly of them. That's it.
Defense mechanism.
That's it. Yeah. And part of that is getting their narcissistic supply, which means they now have to gaslight people into submission and destroy them, which is really bad. So the narcissist doesn't hate anybody because they don't even like themselves.
Yeah. And so there are some things that are bad or good for everyone. Everyone needs love.
Yep.
Psychological trauma is harmful for everyone. It's harmful in different ways. People react maladaptively in different ways to it. Arsenic and cyanide will kill everyone.
That's right.
But then there's a tremendous amount of variation where there's a lot of gray areas. So we just want to point this out when you're dealing with your emotions, because there's so many freaking people on social media and the internet, and they're saying, do it this way, and they oversimplify things down to one or two solutions, and it actually helps some people and harms others. It really does.
Correct.
So let's keep going.
Talk about a lot of tools to understand what emotions are, for you to understand what your emotional states mean and what they don't mean. And in doing that, that will allow you to place value on whether or not you should hold an emotional state as true or not true, whether or not it has meaning or it doesn't, as well as whether or not the emotions of others are important to you in a given context. We're going to talk a lot about development. In fact, we're going to center a lot of our discussion today around infancy and puberty. We're also going to talk about tools for enhancing one's emotional range and for navigating difficult emotional situations. I'm not a clinical psychologist. I'm not a therapist, but I do have some background in psychology. And today I'm going to be drawing from...
He actually has a master's degree in psychology, just so you know.
The psychology greats, not me, but from the greats of psychology who studied emotion, who studied emotional development, and linking that to the neuroscience of emotion, because nowadays we understand a lot about the chemicals and the hormones and the neural circuits in the brain and body that underlie emotion. So while there's no one single universally true theory of emotion, at the intersection of many of the existing theories, there are really some ground truths. If we want to understand emotions, we have to look at where emotions first develop. And the rule that every good neuroanatomist knows is that if you want to understand what a part of the brain does, you have to address two questions. You have to know what connections does that brain area make? And you need to know what's called the developmental origin of that structure. And what are the brain areas for emotion? And nowadays, there's a lot of debate about this. For years, it was thought that there might be circuits, meaning connections in the brain that generate the feeling of being happy, or circuits that generate the feeling of being sad, etc. That's been challenged. And yet, I think there's good evidence for circuits in the brain, such as limbic circuits and other circuits, that shift our overall states or our overall level of alertness or calmness, or whether or not they bias us toward viewing the outside world or paying more attention to what's going on inside our bodies. But the important
just notice that he's not only talking about emotions in our brain, but also in our bodies. That's important to note, because emotions, we feel it throughout our nervous system, which goes throughout our entire body.
Yes.
And we have just as many neurons in our torso, especially concentrated in our gut. The neurons in our gut is called our second brain. You can Google it. It's neuroscience. But just as many neurons in our torso, not nerves, neurons processing data as there are in our brain. About the same amount. So when he says throughout our body, we generate emotions, we store trauma, etc., throughout our nervous system, throughout our body. Yes. And we have neurons processing data in different parts of our body.
One thing to understand is that emotions do arise in the brain and body. And if we want to
in the brain and body,
understand how emotions work, we have to look how emotions are built. And they are built during infancy, adolescence, and puberty. And then it continues into adulthood, but the groundwork is laid down early in development when we are small children. You were born into this world without really any understanding of the things around you. Now, there are two ways that you can interact with the world, and you're always doing them more or less to some degree at the same time. Those are interoception, paying attention to what's going on inside you, what you feel internally, and exteroception, paying attention to what's going on outside you. Hold that in mind, please, because the fact that you're both interocepting and exterocepting is true for your entire life, and it sets the foundation for understanding emotions. It's absolutely critical. As an infant, you didn't have any knowledge of what you needed. You didn't understand hunger. You didn't understand cold or heat or any of that. When you needed something, you experienced that as anxiety. You would feel an increase in alertness if you had to use the bathroom. You would feel an increase in alertness if you were hungry. And you would vocalize. You would cry out. You would act agitated. You might coo. You might do a number of different things. And then your caregiver, whoever that might have been, would respond to that. So this is actually really important to understand that a baby, when you were a baby and when I was a baby, we didn't have any sense of the outside world except that it responded to our acts of anxiety, essentially.
So hang on
All
right
developmental
there,
psychologists agree that baby.
So point out here, he's talking about anxiety. And normally in our world, we refer to anxiety as bad, right? I'm anxious. I have anxiety. It's holding me down. It's making me struggle, whatever. The kind of anxiety he's talking about now is regular, non-toxic anxiety.
Some anxiety serves us. Yeah.
Yeah. I'm hungry. You know, I got to go pee. I got to do whatever I got to do. I got to change my diaper. I got to do whatever I got to do.
Yeah.
That's what babies are talking about. When, you know, everybody says he's crying now. Oh, it must need his diaper changed. Right. So this is good anxiety that he's talking about that we develop to help us survive and move forward.
Yeah. And it's limbic system, which is in the middle of our brain. And now as adults, if you're walking on a mountain trail 2 feet wide, 1,000-foot drop on your right, you'll be anxious. That's serving you. That's keeping you cautious so you don't misstep and die. Or you decide to take a safer route. But it's the same thing here. So anxiety is our brain sensing we're in a situation where if things go wrong, there will be pain. And I think that that's very accurate for us as an adult. As a child, I think that still loosely translates, because a child goes poo or pee or is hungry. If that's not taken care of, there will be pain for that child. So I think it's appropriate to even apply that definition to children and what happens with babies. But honestly, there's a part of his speech here that just completely matches a speech I give to people all the time, which is, we're born in this world. We have a little instinct. Beyond that, we know nothing.
Correct.
And we don't understand the outside world at all. And our subconscious development, the belief systems, which defines the subjective experience we have in a given moment, is we're growing up, we're babies, we're infants, we're children, we're adolescents, and we're experiencing new things we've never experienced before. And we're forming narratives, beliefs, interpretations as to what everything means. That is what, more than anything, okay, that mixed with instinct, I'll say, to some greater or lesser degree, is going, the combination together defines our subjective experience. And in many, many, many instances, especially in the modern world, well, I'm not saying in all instances. So I'm not saying instinct does not matter. I'm not saying that at all. But there are many instances where the subjective experience is entirely or almost entirely defined by our subconscious belief systems that develop as we're developing. That's what drives the subjective experience more than anything else.
Correct.
But also instinct does play a role. So I'm not minimizing instinct at all. We'll keep going.
Babies lack the ability to make cognitive sense of the outside world. But in this feeling of anxiety and registering one's own internal state and then crying out to the outside world, either through crying or subtle vocalizations, or even just cooing, making some noise, we start to develop a relationship with the outside world in which our internal states, our shifts in anxiety, start to drive requests, and people come and respond to those requests. And this gets to the basis of what emotions are about, which are emotions are really about forming bonds and being able to predict things in the world. And at this point, I actually just want to pause and mention a really interesting tool that is trying to address this question of what are emotions and what do they consist of, that you can use if you like. This is an app. I didn't develop it. I don't have any relationship to them, but the app was developed by people at Yale, and it's called Mood Meter. What they're trying to do is put more nuance, more subtlety on our words and our language for emotions, and be able to allow you to predict how you're going to feel in the future. I'm on the app right now, and I know you can't see this, but it's called Mood Meter. You know, it says to me, "Hi, Andrew, how are you right now?" And I click the little tab that says, "I feel."
So I thought about skipping through this, but he actually uses this for a little bit of what he talks about later. So we'll just kind of power through this.
And I can either pick.
And this is actually helping people develop emotional awareness. And it's going to tie into something I want to comment on a little later. So I'll let it play through.
High energy and unpleasant, high energy and pleasant, low energy, unpleasant, or low energy, pleasant. And I would say right now, I feel high energy, pleasant. So I just revealed to you how I feel. So I click on that, and then it gives you a gallery of colors, and you just move your finger to the location where you think it matches most. And as you do that, little words pop up. So say motivated, cheerful, inspired. I would say I'm feeling right now cheerful.
This is like what we do, the descriptive word list, Tim.
Yes.
So you click that.
The point is to get awareness, and there's a point to getting awareness of what your emotions mean. So we'll get into that later.
And then you just go to the next window, and it just says, "What are you doing?" And this feels like play to me, but I'm going to call it work. And then that's it. And then what it does is it basically starts to collect data on you. You're giving it information, and it starts to link that to other features that you allow it access to if you like. And it starts helping you be able to predict how you're going to feel at different times a day. And it points to a couple really interesting features, which is that we don't really have enough language to describe all the emotional states. And yet there's some core truths to what makes up an emotion. This can really help people, kids and adults, understand better what they're feeling and why, and when best to engage in certain activities, and thankfully, when best to avoid certain activities too. So the way this works is the following. You need to ask yourself at any point, You could do this right now if you like. What's your level of autonomic arousal? Autonomic arousal is just the continuum, the range of alert to calm. So if you're in a panic right now, you are like 10 out of 10 on the arousal scale. If you're asleep, you're probably not comprehending what I'm saying, although maybe a little bit. But let's say you're very drowsy, you might be at a 1 or a 2. And then
I think it's funny how he says, well, you may comprehend a little bit when you're asleep, because he knows that our subconscious is still taking things in when we're asleep. But anyways,
there's this other axis, this other question, which is what we call valence. Now, valence is a value. Do you feel good or bad? I would say I feel pretty good right now. On a scale of 1 to 10, I'm like I don't know, I feel like a 7. So I'm alert and I feel pretty good. And then there's a third thing, which is how much we are interocepting and how much we are exterocepting. All right. So how much our attention is focused internally on what we're feeling and how much it's focused externally. And this is always going to be in a dynamic balance. So for instance, if you're really, really stressed, oftentimes that puts you in a position to be really in touch with what's going on in your body. If you start having a lot of somatic, a lot of bodily sensations, like your heart is beating so fast that you can't ignore it, then you're really strongly interoceptive. So there are these 3 things: how alert or sleepy you are, that's 1. How good or bad you feel, that's 2. And then whether or not most of your attention is directed outward or whether or not it's directed inward. And much of what we call emotions are made up by those 3 things. Let's return to the infant. There's the baby in the crib. It's mostly interocepting. As caregivers bring it what it needs, you hope, milk, diaper changes, etc., a warm blanket if it's cold, pull off the blanket when the baby's fussing and it's too warm, because babies get too warm also. It starts to exterocept. The baby starts to look into the outside world and start making predictions. It starts wondering how much it needs to cry, or predicting, well, if I cry like a little bit, then mom comes over and I get my milk. Babies are starting to evaluate and do all this, but they're not doing it consciously. They're doing this in order to relieve anxiety. As a young creature,
this is where subconscious programs start forming. So just so you know, when predictions, what our brain does is our brain looks at everything we've experienced thus far, and the bias is strongest towards before age 8, and still a heavy bias till before age 14. And based on what happened back then, our brain gives us these emotions to help direct us in a way that our brain predicts will serve us. Does that make sense, Tim?
Absolutely.
And that is belief systems.
And I always go back to the pattern matching, right? It's always continuing to refine until it stops doing that by probably anywhere in between 14 and 25. But it will continue to affect that narrative, right? It's adjusting that narrative, either confirming it or unconfirming it or whatever.
And it may just be fine tuning in the later years.
Correct. So it's looking for the patterns that it learned before to protect itself.
Yeah.
Even if the protection is maladaptive.
And so that's our translation of what Dr. Huberman is talking about in the field of, subconscious belief systems and how we change it. But notice he's really big on getting us aware. I'm going to weigh in on that later, because that's actually the first step to rewire your brain, is to be aware of actually what's in you.
Absolutely.
He's also going to go into attachment styles in just a little bit, which is very fascinating, because after he talks about that, let's talk a little bit about attachment styles and how your experience as a baby is affecting how you deal with relationships with people today, like at a very, very profound, deep level. So
I love the study that he refers to. It's really awesome.
Yeah. So here we go.
An infant and young toddler, you were mainly focused inward, and you started to understand what was going on outward as a way of predicting what would bring you relief, what would remove your anxiety. And that's where the fundamental rules of your experience, your emotional experience, were laid down. So now let's talk about what kind of
fundamental rules. It's the basics of subconscious belief systems. That's our way of putting it.
Baby you were. because that actually informs your emotionality now. These are classic, they're actually famous experiments done by Bowlby and Ainsworth. This is this classic experiment of what was called the strange situation task, in which, and I'm describing it very coarsely here, I realize, but a mother and child come into the laboratory. The baby and the mother or father play together for a bit, and then the mother leaves. The mother leaves for some period of time and then comes back. And the research is devoted to understanding the response of the child when the caretaker, the mother or the father, returns. Bowlby and Ainsworth and many of their scientific offspring and colleagues identified at least 4 patterns that babies display when their caretaker returns. And they group these into group A, B, C, D, so much so that the kids were referred to as A babies, B babies, C babies, or D babies. The first babies are the A babies. When their caretaker would return, the infant would respond with happiness, with what looked like delight. They would go to the caretaker. They seemed happy. These are referred to as secure attached kids. The B babies, as they're called, were less likely to seek comfort from their caregiver when the caregiver would return. So they would sometimes continue to play with their toys, or they would be with they had an adult in the room while the parent was gone. They would stay with them. These were referred to as avoidant babies. The C babies would respond to the return of the caregiver with acts of annoyance. They seemed kind of angry. And those were referred to as ambivalent babies. And then the third category, the D babies, were the disorganized babies. The child avoided interactions with everyone, and their behavior didn't really change whether or not the caregiver was there or not. This work, this classic work, opened up a huge set of important questions that related to what is the reestablishment of the bond really about? I mean, what's actually being figured out here is not whether or not there are 4 categories of babies. That's interesting, but it presumably is more interesting to focus on what is it that defines a really good bond, a secure attachment or an insecure attachment or an avoidant attachment. And
so what percent of whether a child is an A, B, C, or D baby is dependent on the nurturing style of the parent? What do you think, Tim?
You'd have to define nurture, but I would say
the parenting style. Yeah,
the parents are having a tremendous emotional impact on the child as they develop into these types of babies.
Yeah.
So nurture could be a lack of nurturing, malnurturing, or true nurturing.
Yeah, and I don't think it's 100% nurture, but I think it's going to be more nurture than any other factor. The nurturing style, the parenting style of the parent. So there's a type of Native American, I think it was the Iroquois, and they were observed as holding, when the baby was a baby for like the first 3 years or so, the baby constantly held by the mother, like held all the time. Like the mom just walk around with the baby, holding the baby like all the time. And man, I can't remember what this study, the exact framework of this study. But what they noticed is that the adults were all very friendly, confident, like secure attachment. They all had a lot of confidence, and they all had like really good bonds with everyone else in their tribe. And it started with just being held constantly for the first 2-3 years of their lives, like all the time. Now, I'm not telling moms to do that. It's definitely worth looking into. I do know that there are families where you'll have one baby who has one attachment style and another who leans more into another attachment style, even with the same parenting style. So I don't think it's a 100% determinant, but as you know, we are constantly going back into people's childhoods And I would say, man, when I see like more anxious or more disorganized, avoidant is maybe a little more neglect in nurturing. Disorganized is like a very chaotic household. It could be lots of fighting with the parents or chaos, or it could be a situation where it's like they're constantly moving, or where it's a single mom and then the guy has 5 dads growing up because she had 5 different boyfriends. And like the angry could be tied to the child was abused physically or something like that. Now, again, I'm just talking in very, 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 very broad strokes. Again, this is not rigid. It's not hard and fast. But I do think the nurturing style, the environment the child was raised in, has a big impact on what attachment style they have. And yeah, I would say overall secure is the best. I would say I'm kind of half avoidant, half secure. I would say I used to be anxious avoidant. I am now not anxious at all. But I'm just so used to being independent that I'm just kind of independent, like, but I would say I'm kind of a mix of avoidant and secure. And the reason I'm no longer anxious avoidant is because I rewired all my trauma out.
Yep.
So do you have anything to add here, Tim?
Yeah, I've often thought of this particular study. I think you told me about it a couple of years ago, and I read it because I always think about how we're raised in that environment. Now, I'm probably more of the secure attachment.
Yeah, you are for sure.
Probably a tiny little bit of the avoidance attachment, just because sometimes I want to be alone. Even from my wife, sometimes I want solitary time. And everybody
needs a little avoidant. We need our alone time, man.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think that's very human, right?
Yeah.
It's I don't want to be with somebody 24/7, even though I'm with her 24/7. She could be in the other room. I could be here. I'm not completely gone.
Yeah.
I'm just by myself for a little bit, doing my own little thing.
Yeah.
So I do like to do my own little thing, but I think overall I've got a secure attachment style. And what I like about this study is it really gives you an underpinning of how important parenthood is and how important proper parenthood is. And looking at today's society in the Western world, how since we've become a very rich society, who's raising our children? Yeah, I'm 8 weeks into my my baby's life, and I drop the baby off at a daycare center for 8 or 9 hours a day for the next 6 years of its life. I got to figure that's going to end up with one of those avoidant, disorganized babies. I mean, or angry, who knows? But gee whiz.
Yeah. So what they've noticed in attachment styles is already you're seeing these behaviors in the babies. And then they track these people 20 years later, 30 years later, and they're noticing that as adults, they have these different ways of relating to people. And some of those ways do not serve people at all. Some of those ways, if you're constantly anxious over whether your boyfriend's going to dump you or not, and so you go to people pleaser, validation seeking mode, you become codependent, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to say that all aspects of every attachment style is bad. It's adaptive for your situation, but overall secure is definitely the best. And there are just what happens as babies is affecting them as adults. Like there's no doubt about it whatsoever.
Hello, Gabe, and hello, Zaramina. Hope you guys.
And we got about a show. Yeah, we got about 1 minute and 10 seconds left of what we wanted to watch, so we'll keep going.
Let's go for it.
Yeah, okay.
The 4 things are gaze, literally eye contact,
and he's
vocalizations. So,
oh crap! I'm sorry. I got to recue that now. I accidentally closed it. What he's talking about is how they show connection with other people.
Right.
So let me cue that up again. All right, here we go. And I just wanted to pause and explain that to cue everyone in. So this is what they're looking at to determine bonding and attachment with the caregiver, the parent.
Bond really about? I mean, what's actually being figured out here is not whether or not there are 4 categories of babies. That's interesting, but it presumably is more interesting to focus on what is it that defines a really good bond, a secure attachment or an insecure attachment or an avoidant attachment. And the 4 things are gaze, literally eye contact, vocalizations, so what we say and how we say it, affect or emotion, so the way that we express, crying, smiling, etc., and touch. But gaze, vocalization, affect, and touch are really the core of this thing that we call social bonds and emotionality. And it's clear from most all of the theories of emotional health that an ability to recognize when your own internal state is being driven primarily by external events as important for being able to emotionally regulate, right? People who are constantly being yanked around by the external happenings in the world, you would say are emotionally labile. They are not in control of their emotions. Even if they're calm all the time, if that calmness only arrives because they're in a placid environment and then you put, a cracker in that environment and they freak out, well, then they're not really calm. So how much the outside environment disrupts your internal environment has everything to do with this balance of interoception and exteroception. And it very likely has roots in whether or not you were secure attached or insecure attached, disorganized or ambivalent as a baby. So while we can't travel back in time, there is an exercise that you can do.
Okay, we'll stop right there. We will put the description in the link. I think this is a pretty recent Huberman.
It is.
Two days ago.
Yep.
The Science of Emotions and Relationships. You guys can see it there. We'll put the link in the description as well later today. But he says some really critical stuff here. Our emotions, we have them for a purpose. Now, I remember Andrew Tate was like, well, I don't pay much attention to my emotions. By the way, sociopaths actually shut down their emotions to a degree, except for anger. So, I don't know. Anyways, not diagnosing him, but going about Tate. No, a third of our brain, our entire limbic system, is generating emotions, and other parts of our body and brain are as well. You're not going to get rid of them. 95%. Any salesperson knows 95% of purchasing decisions are made by emotion. It has a huge impact on our life. And what emotions are doing from a I guess a neurobiological standpoint is our conscious mind thinks things over, does analysis, logic, ponders, etc. That takes time. As we're going through life, things happen and we just have to respond. And so our instinct, our emotion, all of that is coming from our subconscious to just, hey, do this, instead of doing a math formula in your head to come up with a solution. That takes too long. So that's where all the stuff we just do automatically without thinking, the emotions, instinct, all of that. That's just do it quick. That's why we have emotions. That's why our brain gives us that. What we first want to do is become aware of our emotions and which ones are not serving us. What is making us to struggle? Some emotions, like some anxiety, do serve us. I had anxiety. This guy gave me this project. Again, my old job, which I still do a little, is setting up trusts and companies for people, some really high-end stuff. I get, $50 million net worth people and 5 million, whatever. And he was telling me to do something. I had anxiety, and I was like, why am I procrastinating this? Why am I having anxiety? Well, what he did was he was gradually kind of pointing me in a direction by kind of saying, well, tweak this, tweak that, tweak that. And so I stopped, and I'm like, what's this anxiety about? And it's like, oh, yeah, he's tweaked things so much, he's actually going to have you do something that could get him sued and blow up in your face, too. And so then I went back and said, no, let's not do this for this reason. He said, okay, I understand. So that was my anxiety serving me. So not all fear, not all anxiety, not all anger is bad. A lot of it serves us, but you need to be aware of what does and what doesn't serve you. And then the emotions that are not serving you, what do we do, Tim, with those?
If you have emotions that aren't serving you, you clear out the subconscious program to the root cause and reprogram that routine to serve you, right? You need to identify what that is. Not sure where you were going on that one, Ryan, but I know that the
That's where I
root
was going.
cause,
Yeah.
what's that?
That's where I was going. I just didn't want to do all the talking.
Yeah. The descriptive word list in the dive to the 5 that Ryan mentioned before, and I've mentioned a number of times, is the tool that we use to help you identify the trauma generating the emotion. The emotion is a fight, flight, flop, or fawn response to your subconscious matching patterns in the world that it should take note of, right? I mean, some are good, like Ryan said, and some are not serving you. They're holding you back. They're procrastinating, making you depressed. You know, if you're depressed, you don't do anything. So you can't get hurt if you do nothing.
That don't serve us.
Right.
And
so,
psychological trauma is at the root of those. When we fix those,
right.
we fix the emotion.
Yeah. So we get into that dive to the 5 and we help you, like Andrew was using that app to help him see what his mood was for the day. Mood is a constant thing, right? You can be in a bad mood, you can be in a good mood, but it's always affected by your emotions, by your environment around you. So it becomes very subjective. If you can rewrite the programs that are not serving you in your subconscious, your day will go better because you're now not harboring all those emotions that was just constantly. I mean, Ryan, you've described it before that even though when you started fixing yourself, that you had this low level chronic anxiety 24/7.
All the time. It was 3 out of 10 on a when I'm calm, there's nothing going wrong. It was 3 out of 10. It would spike to 9, 10 out of 10.
Right.
When something did go wrong. And you saw that in me. For our audience, Tim and I, we first started working
about 20 years ago now.
2005, 20 years ago. And then we stopped working together for a while. And then you met me again and you noticed my personality was different. You're like, what the hell happened to this guy? Because I reprogrammed my subconscious and got
totally changed.
And I like the anxious, I would say I was totally anxious, avoidant attachment style. The entire anxious component is gone. I'd say about half of the avoidant. And I'm kind of where I want to be right now. But you can actually change your attachment style with subconscious reprogramming. I absolutely did it.
So
so
that's what we do. Ryan changed enough to make me want to do this. So I spent a couple $1,000s and became a certified hypnotherapist. And then I really started learning Ryan's method and programs for what we do day in and day out now. And what is amazing in when people want to work with us is when the pain becomes great enough that they can't move forward.
Yeah.
They're stuck.
Like I gotta do something.
Stuck. I know people that will play video games almost 24/7. And when I say that, it's because they have insomnia because their brain won't stop.
Yeah.
And when they do go to sleep, it's from exhaustion after 3 or 4 days of playing games or whatever. And then they finally collapse. That's not serving them. They're not making any money. They're not growing as a human being. They're stuck.
No, they're in their parents' basement.
When people get like that, that's where we come in. We help them out.
Did you ever get to do a session for that person, or are they not ready yet?
No, his psychologist told him hypnosis was bunk.
Yeah.
And I said, well, the reason she told you that is because that would lose her business. Yeah.
And we've done shows before where there is that reporter on Joe Rogan talking about how she dug into the world of psychotherapists and found a lot of them treat their patients as annuity payments, just a payment every month. Now, I do think there are a lot of psychologists who really do have good intentions. So
absolutely,
I'm not going to make any sort of blanket statement that they're all bad. And I did about 100 sessions over 15 years for my manic depression. It fixed about 60% of it. It took forever. The last few years didn't do anything. There was still a big chunk of it there, and it didn't fix anything else. Didn't fix my rage. It didn't fix my anxiety. It didn't, just feelings of worthlessness. Didn't fix any of that. But it did fix about 60% of the depression.
Yeah, it does help.
Do some good.
It does help. It just doesn't go to the root cause. And in comparison, there's also 10% of the auto mechanics out there that just plain suck.
Yeah, probably more honestly. Could be. just get into the comments real quick. Gabriel, you said Braca is, and then I have no idea what this means, man.
I think he was talking.
Okay.
He put that comment right after I talked about changing my diaper.
Oh, okay. Zuckerberg is definitely a D baby. Okay, so that's what was that? Disorganized,
that's disorganized, disoriented,
ambivalent. Yeah. Okay. Good afternoon. Good afternoon to you, Gabriel E. Thanks for coming. So that is our show today. But listen, we're not getting rid of our emotions. Right. So first step, become aware of what they're telling you. Every emotion has a message, a narrative, a belief, or a prediction, which I'm giving you this emotion because I think this might happen. And so I want you to behave this way to deal with it. Find out what that is. Find out which emotions are serving you, which ones aren't. The ones that aren't is because of all this, maladaptive stuff that happened in your childhood trauma, whether it's neglect or abuse. It doesn't have to be a parent beating you every day. It could be you're in grade school and the whole class laughed at you when someone blabbed out that you liked a girl in front of the whole class. Something like I have people coming to me and now they just have all this anxiety with girls and they're really embarrassed and they're really socially awkward. And that one thing could play a big contributing role, or it could be a lot of little things together, but our brains evolved for ancient hunter-gatherer tribes. We're now in modern times. So there's a mismatch, and then bad parenting will get you to believe certain things that make you struggle the rest of your life. We can go and rewire and fix it. Emotions is a massive part of that. Massive. Whether we like it or not, most of what we do is greatly directed by our emotions. Our anxieties, internal resistance, our desires, all of that. There's an interplay of subconscious beliefs along with instinct in there, everything else. We can get it working for you. And then everything changes, and it's not a small change. It's huge. It's massive. And then you enjoy the benefits through the rest of your life. So worth it. Absolutely try our free program. You'll see the benefits. And feel free to reach out to us. We do hypnosis sessions, but you go to the description. I'll talk to anyone for free, 1-on-1, 30 minutes. So
that's it.
That's all I had. Do you have anything to add before we sign off, Tim?
Nope, we've said a bunch.
All right. Thanks, guys, for coming in and watching. Hope you found this useful. Take this knowledge and then act on it. And then you'll learn what we've learned and what we are still learning, what we continue to learn. And that is you have more power than you know. That's our show. Thank you.